Hey neighbor, welcome back to ARTV. My name is John, and it's time for a review of the sophomore album No Good Left to Give by the post-hardcore, alternative, and emo band Movements. I so easily latched onto the sound that Movements were laying down. They managed to fuse in everything from spoken word, aggressive post-hardcore, and really catchy hooks. I found them with their Outgrown Things EP, anxiously awaited their debut album Feel Something that definitely didn't disappoint, even though I do think that it's a flawed record, at least in some perspectives. Don't Give Up Your Ghost landed as the harrowing lead single that really gave me chills as the bass groove landed and the tactful lyrics just really made an impact and gave me Linkin Park vibes, but still very Movements at the same time. With that and Skin to Skin coming out as some really intriguing, captivating singles that saw them really improving as musicians, I was wondering, can they continue that momentum, that level of intrigue for an entire record? Feel Something definitely had some fierce competition because there were so many bangers, so much aggression, so much relatability packed into that record, it was going to be hard to top. But this time around on No Good Left to Give, I don't feel that Movements necessarily set out saying, let's top ourselves in every department. They just naturally grew as musicians, and that really comes out in the final product. Spencer York's drumming on this record is insane. It sounds so good, even better than Feel Something. He's laying down some of the most interesting drum beats that are coming out in this quote-unquote scene. Also, the bass work, the guitars, even vocally, Pat sounds a little bit more moody and reflective, but also passive-aggressive and sexual at times, which isn't bad at all. Let me circle back to the rhythm section though, because the drum and bass work is literally the cornerstone for No Good Left to Give. They sound insanely tight, and I'm just kind of floored by that work, just positioning itself to kind of overshadow even the vocals and the guitar in places. Will Yip as a producer is somebody that is looked to as a hero in the scene for a reason. He's worked with so many fantastic bands, from Code Orange to Turnover to literally anybody else you could point a finger at in the scene, and I can understand why people turn to him. He brings out and kind of emulates the best qualities of the band and also kind of challenges them to branch out a bit. As Movements continue to mature, I wouldn't say that their sound has drifted all that far from their debut. There's just slight tweaks here and there, and it feels like a very natural sophomore set. I think a lot of bands fall into this trap of either trying to one-up themselves or else do something completely new, whereas Movements understand their strengths and they knew how to improve upon the songwriting and lay down other sonic avenues that kind of made sense for them. Pat does a really solid job at focusing in as a vocalist. There's still some spoken word sections and also some screams, although they're nowhere near as prevalent, but when they do come out, my god, it makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. But also, I think they just took the time to kind of carve things out to say, hey, instead of recording this so quickly, let's think about how we could approach this from a different angle, whether that be Austin's guitars or Spencer's drums. No Good Left to Give is an album that's going to connect for a lot of people because the lyrics are extremely poignant and well written, but they're not trying too hard to be something that they're not or pretend. There is sexual and sensual energy on this record. Skin to Skin is a primary example, or you could even look to something like Seneca, which sees Pat kind of reflecting back in an old relationship that kind of flew out the window, and now he's scrolling back through Instagram and this girl that he once loved is getting married. It's a very tricky part of life when you're kind of coming of age, 19 to 24. It's a very different time in Movements, and I think the lyrics reflect that. With this album being 12 songs about 44 minutes long, it's roughly on par with Feel Something, both in terms of length and the overall duration, not overstaying its welcome. I think that there are a few times where they kind of take a left turn and the chorus doesn't necessarily make sense for the rest of the song. Garden Eyes slightly throws me off in that regard with the hook, but to an even bigger degree, I would say Santiago Peak is one that doesn't necessarily scratch an itch for me. That song feels underwhelming as a whole, but fortunately, that's in the extreme minority here. Brutal honesty immediately starts to simmer on the album's opening cut, In My Blood, which slowly roars to life with a very different approach than their initial opener, Full Circle, but I appreciate this song's slow burn gameplay even if I don't feel it's one of the strongest offerings here. It does a good job at laying down at what this mood, what this reflection is going to be, very pensive, very heady. Pat spends a lot of time trying to exercise those demons as the record continues rolling on. I think Tunnel Vision is possibly the biggest banger that this album has to offer. It's aggressive, it's loud, it has some screams packed in, the guitars are top notch, and again, that rhythm section totally locked in, you just want to scream back every word. I don't want you to get the wrong idea and think that I've dismissed Garden Eyes as an entire song just because I have a slight issue with the way that they transition from verse to chorus. I feel that it's a little bit too abrupt. I do think that that song is flames overall. I love the writing in the verses, I love the drum work on this track in particular, and I could really say that for so many because the beats are just so kind of manipulated. He lays something down that's carving out its own lane. Bass grooves continue to serve as a backbone for this record that really keep me engaged with the musicality because they're actually doing something interesting. They're not just plodding around in the background. It's so crisp in the mix. The mixing, the production is top notch, and I love that. I'm taken back by it. And it all kind of results and comes to this epic conclusion, starting with Moonlight lines, a very reflective tune that feels like maybe a good night drive moment as Pat kind of looks back to this relationship, like yes, we had our good moments, but was it really just this kind of keep the bed warm type of relationship where no feelings were exchanged? And then we move into two songs that I can only describe as a perfect match. They have lyrics about each other that kind of call to the other, so I feel that they have to go in the pair. It's No Good Left to Give, the title track, along with Love Took the Last of It. Something about that title track in particular is just so blissful, so moody and nostalgic. You can just dive right into that ocean of feels. And then they crank up the heat a bit for that closing moment, but it does a great job at kind of closing out all of the thoughts, tying this record together, and going out on an extremely high note. As I reach the finale of this review, I find it so hard to just kind of put the closing chapter on it, because obviously our minds want to compare this to Feel Something, and it's definitely an older sibling of that. It's a very natural progression for movements, but at the same time, it's its own thing. I respect that they grew a lot as musicians, and in my own way, I kind of respect both of these records on a very similar level. As with their debut album, Feel Something, I'm rating No Good Left to Give a very strong 4 out of 5, although that could bump up or stay the same over time. I'm having a hard time. Don't forget to drop a like on this Movements review while you're here. Let me know your thoughts on Movements' back catalog, your excitement for this record, did it live up to those expectations? Any and all thoughts welcome down below. If you want to see my coverage of their debut, then tap this card here, or tap here for another recent rock review. All of my socials, including my Twitch, my Patreon, I'm doing additional streams. Those can be found linked down below, and I'll be back soon for more on ARTV.